Welcome. Thank you for coming this morning here to First Union Church. And what a wonderful day that it is. It's great. Well, let's open with Blessed Assurance. It's number 442 in the hymnals. And of course, the words are on the screen as well. Blessed Assurance, Jesus is mine. Continue now with the very appropriate hymn with the idea of missions and outreach. It's number 705, Send the Light.
Send the light.
Well, I'm going to ask Chad to come forward. I believe he grew up here. Is that correct? So welcome home. I never met him before today. We've corresponded before, but it is good to meet you and welcome to your family. I ran across your dad a few months ago at the reception here after Joan Leach's funeral. And then I went to get some gas yesterday. I'm at the gas station, and there's this guy on a motorcycle at the pump next to me, and he's wearing a Cedar Campus t-shirt. And I thought, well, there's a legacy shirt for the area. And he comes up to me, and he realized, of course I know you. And so I asked him if he knew about the breakfast here, and I said, please come. And so it's good to see Becky here today as well. I had heard about Becky, but through the Lions Club and all those dinners that she used to make. And so you've left a legacy there, too. Anyway, welcome back. And we're anxious to hear what you have to say.
Sounds great. Well, thank you, Pastor Jim. Thanks for the invitation. It is great to be back home. As Pastor Jim mentioned, I grew up here. I learned to sing Sunday school songs and learn Bible stories right underneath this floor from Sue Rye and Nancy Smith and others. I learned how to study the Bible inductively from Chuck Pelkey. He was the youth pastor when I was in high school. I had a chance to go to Puerto Rico with him and Rob Preston and others when I was in high school as well. I graduated in 2006 and went to Michigan State from 2006 to 2010, where I got involved with a campus ministry called InterVarsity that was totally transformational in my spiritual journey, and have been on staff with InterVarsity since then, since 2010. So I'm starting to get to a point where I really have to do the math every year to think about how long I've been on staff. This is the beginning of my 14th year. And First Union Church and people from this church have supported me, prayed for me, and gave to be able to let me be able to work with InterVarsity for these 13 years and counting. So I'm very grateful. It's great to be back. I haven't been here at all since before the pandemic, and I don't think I've said anything from the pulpit here in maybe 10 years. So hopefully we can make this more of hopefully I'll be invited back. Maybe we'll just wait and see. But we'll be happy to come back anytime. It's great to be with you all. It's great to see the ways God is working in this beautiful small town church. I do have some slides. If you guys want to drop those down, that would be awesome. Okay, thank you. I was wondering about that. Perfect. So I work primarily, I went to Michigan State, but I work primarily at the University of Michigan campus in Flint, so that's sort of cross-cultural for me, but it's been a good experience. A couple community colleges nearby too, and I also help to organize missions opportunities for students from around the state of Michigan, which I really enjoy. Okay, perfect. So okay, great. I can see it there too. Okay, really haven't done this in a while. So I titled this message, A Necessary Interruption. My only hope today is to just tell you guys some stories about what God is doing on campus, hopefully offer a word of encouragement, and to also try to end on time. So we'll see how that goes. A necessary interruption happens in this story in Luke chapter 5, which I think is on the next screen. Do I point it this way or that way? Or okay, perfect. Oh, right, yes. Obligatory family picture. That's my family. My wife, Ren, is a flight attendant for Delta Airlines and is working today. My kids are all here, Jackson, James, and Alice. Jackson's 9, James is 8, and Alice is 7. So you can talk to them more after if you want to. We're going to look at Luke 5 for a minute, and then I just want to make a couple connections to things that we're seeing God do on campus in ways we're seeing the themes in this story kind of lived out in our context. One of my favorite things to do on campus is to sit down with a student and ask them about their spiritual background or their spiritual journey. Find out where they might be at with God and try to encourage them to take the next steps. I probably do this 3 to 5 times a week all year round. And it's a very simple discipleship and evangelism strategy, and it helps to build community. I don't want to be just like a preacher, and actually I don't really preach very often, so this is a little out of my comfort zone. I really like to sit down and have those one-on-one conversations with students. When I do that, Luke 5, 1 to 11 is a favorite story to look at because you see somebody on a spiritual journey here in this story. So with that said, I'm just going to read it and then go from there. So one day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. So were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. So Peter learns, I think, three things in this interaction with Jesus, and I want to try to highlight those and then connect them to some things on campus. So at the first, I have a slide, right? First, Peter learns that Jesus is captivating. At the beginning of the story, Jesus is talking with the crowds, and Peter is listening. He's paying attention. He didn't show up to hear Jesus speak. He was just running his business, living his life, cleaning his nets. And Jesus showed up there and was teaching, and Peter's listening. I wonder what Jesus was saying. It says they were listening to the word of God, but doesn't really elaborate. Shortly before this, actually at the end of chapter 4, Jesus had healed Peter's mother-in-law. So there is a little context that they have. Jesus first asked to use Peter's boat, maybe to help amplify sound over the water. But Jesus is looking for more than that from Peter. So then he asked Peter to let down the nets. And Peter is clearly reluctant. He knows fishing. He knows these waters. Jesus is more of a construction man who's now a preacher, healer. But this is the very beginning of that. People don't really know fully who he is. I think this was probably a irritating, frustrating sort of moment for Peter. I know when someone tells me how to do something that I feel like I know how to do well. I don't always like that. And so we see Peter express this when he says, "Because you say so, I will try it." He probably wouldn't have said yes to anybody else, but because Jesus said so, he's willing to do it. He's beginning to become captivated by Jesus. He's beginning to see that there's something unique, something different about this guy. So in Flint and in Southeast Michigan in general, part of our context is that there's a lot of Muslim people and a lot of Muslim students on our campus, and we believe that we are called to love them, to be a light to them, and to help point them towards a relationship with Jesus. And our students right now really have a heart for the Muslim students on campus, which has been beautiful to see. We have one student, I'll call him, I'll just give you the letter of his first name, which is S, just out of respect for his kind of spiritual journey. But he came to small group every week this whole past year. One of his friends, a core student leader in our group named Caleb, reached out to him and invited him to a Bible study. He's never read the Bible before. I was able to visit the group once in March, and to see the way he engaged and asked questions and put himself into the passage, into the story, was really remarkable. With Muslim people, it's like a long-term kind of investment. It's not a one quick moment usually. I asked S for a testimony about what that was like over the course of this year, because I was so intrigued by the way he was engaging in that space. And he told me small group helped me learn more about Christianity and Christians in a way I hadn't known before. The community was open-minded and welcoming towards me and helped revive my spirituality in a way I've never felt before. And I thought that was really remarkable. He didn't get to a point this year of saying, "I want to be a Christian now." But I think he is starting to become captivated by Jesus and see there's something different in this community and in this person than what I've seen before. So we'll be back on campus. Classes start on August 28th, so we hope to reach out to him again and get him back involved as we relaunch our small groups in a couple weeks. So what about you? Have you been captivated by Jesus? Is he captivating you maybe recently? So the second thing that I see Peter learn here in this story, there we go, is that Peter is unworthy. Peter realizes that he is unworthy. There's a few phrases in this story that indicate the incredible size of this catch. Such a large number, the nets began to break, even the boats began to sink. So I was reflecting on this, and I was thinking, like, if they had caught like 50 or 100 fish, they would have won like probably like a fishing competition and been like, this was the best day fishing ever. And they would have wondered, how does Jesus know so much about fishing? How does he know where the fish were going to be? But that's not what happened, right? They caught probably thousands of fish. It was like the greatest catch in the history of the world. So many that it was more than their boats were built for. Their boats couldn't handle it. So they never even anticipated that they might catch this many fish at one time. So instead of concluding that Jesus knows about fishing, they realized Jesus controls the fish. They realized that Jesus controls the fish in the sea. So Peter responds to this realization dramatically, falling down, confessing his sin, declaring that he's not worthy to be in Jesus' presence. It's quite a turn from like a lot of fish to all of a sudden, I'm not worthy to be around you. I don't know what Peter's sins were. We do know from other places that he kind of had a brash personality. He may have said things in anger without thinking. He may have only cared about himself. Maybe had some kind of addiction, maybe worse. But what I think Peter realized here is that sin ultimately is any way we come up short of being like Jesus. And up to this point, maybe he compared himself to other fishermen, thought he was doing okay. But when he started to look at who Jesus is and be in Jesus' presence, he realized that he was unworthy. He realized that he was a sinner. Jesus doesn't explicitly say to him, like, I forgive you or your sins are forgiven, but I think that's strongly implied when he says, don't be afraid, from now on you will fish for people. I think Jesus is saying, despite your brokenness, your trauma, your choices, your circumstances, your etc., you're not outside of the power of my reach. Jesus' power to heal, forgive, transform, and send is not under threat at all for Peter, nor is it for us. So I want to tell you about another student. Last fall, I met a student named Justin. He saw an event we were doing on Instagram and filled out our online contact card. So I don't know if that sounds bizarre or crazy, but this is actually a very common way that we meet students nowadays. They see something on social media and they fill out a Google form that sends them our information, and then we follow up with them. So I texted him. We were able to meet on campus, like in a one-on-one way that I enjoy. We probably looked at this passage. I normally do with students. He told me that he grew up going to church once in a while, but when he, like 10 years before, his parents divorced, and then that kind of just ended for him. But just last summer, so a couple months before we met, he decided that he wanted to kind of reconnect with his faith again. So just as we were wrapping up our conversation, our chapter president, Abby, walked by and asked him, so this is like 3 days before our fall conference, and I decided not to invite him to it, only because I try not to overwhelm students with too many invitations right away. So I just invited him to a small group, and he said he wanted to come, and I thought, okay, we'll just take the next step one at a time. Well, Abby didn't know that. She just walked by and said, oh, nice to meet you. Are you coming to Aspire, our fall conference? And he was like, what's Aspire? Chad never told me anything about it. And he wanted to come, and he registered right then, and I was pretty surprised because we literally had just met. And he didn't know anybody else from our group either. So anyway, he came to our fall conference that weekend. He went to seminars on like hospitality and how to hear God's voice. He heard the gospel shared clearly by one of my coworkers. And in our chapter time after, he started to acknowledge ways that he's unworthy, started to confess some sin and some things that he'd been struggling with. For the first time he's ever kind of told anybody that and said, I want to let go of these things and I want to receive the forgiveness of Jesus. And before the day ended, he said that was his sort of commitment or declaration. I remember him saying, I want to follow Jesus for the rest of my life. Not just I hope to go to church again, but like I want to know and live my life for God. So Justin is created in the image of God and is deeply loved by God, and we wanted to make sure he knows that. But as he looked at Jesus, he realized that he too, like all of us, have come up short of God's expectations and are unworthy. So what about you? Do you see ways that you, on your own, without God's intervention, are unworthy of a relationship with God? The good news is, because of Jesus' death in our place, he makes us worthy to be in that relationship. But apart from that, we also are unworthy. And I know I had to have a time in my life where I had to realize that as well, and I can tell you more about that if you want over coffee afterwards. So, whoops, I think I need to hit the next slide. So the last thing I want to mention that Peter learns in this story is that Jesus is the one to stick with. So when we study this passage inductively on campus, one thing students usually notice is the progression from master to Lord. So Peter calls Jesus master initially, and then by the end of the passage, he says Lord. Master is not wrong, but Lord says a lot more about who Jesus is and his role over Peter's life. So that made me think about just how life-changing this day was for Peter. At the beginning of the story, he's tired, discouraged, feeling like hopeless, maybe feeling like I'm not a good fisherman. I need to find another career. What else am I going to do? Not to mention his sense of like spiritual brokenness. But by the end of the story, he's aware of the presence of God. He's forgiven. He's beginning to be transformed. He's called to leave everything behind and go plant those seeds of the gospel and anyone and everyone that he can. And history shows that that's what he did to a great impact in the world. So this was a necessary interruption in his life, and that's why I decided to call this necessary interruption. Probably felt annoying at first, but I think later he realized it was really necessary for his life to be interrupted in this kind of way. Peter realized that Jesus doesn't just know about fishing, but that he controls the fish. And so Peter knows that this is where I want to be. I want to be with this guy that controls the fish. If he can do this now, he can do this anytime he wants. So this was like a huge catch of fish. He could have been rich if he sold all that. But compared to sticking with Jesus, the fish didn't matter to him anymore. So one last story. We have a student named Charlotte that we met last fall as well. Charlotte is what we would call like a nun, N-O-N-E, nun, somebody who just has no faith. So when you, or I should say had no faith, hint, she just grew up never going to church and never being exposed to faith at all. So when you check a box, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, whatever, it's just none. Like she just had no spiritual background. That's also very common these days. But she also didn't really have any baggage, like any reasons she didn't want to go to church or didn't want to consider who Jesus might be. So let me tell you about another student, then I'll circle back to Charlotte. So we have a student named Abby who was going to church last fall and listening to her pastor, which is a praise in its own right, a student leader. And she heard her pastor say, this week I want you to pray that God would open a door to one person that you can invest in, and I want you to take that step and invest in that person. So the whole week she was thinking about, who am I called to invest in? We got to Thursday night, and that's like the last sort of day on campus where there's a lot of students on campus, and she was feeling the pressure of like, I got to find my one person. So Abby's walking across campus to our large group meeting and passes someone she doesn't know in the skywalk. As soon as she saw Charlotte, she felt like this is the one person, but she didn't know what to say. So they just kind of walked past each other, and as soon as Abby got past her, she just turned around because she thought, I really got to say something. As soon as she turned around, she saw that Charlotte had also turned around and was looking right back at her. And she thought, yep, this is the moment. And she said, do you want to come to InterVarsity? And Charlotte said, yeah, okay, sure. And so they walked across campus together to large group, and of course Charlotte had no idea what she even just said yes to. So Abby was able to explain to her a little bit about what InterVarsity is. I'll just briefly say, she just got involved in other things in our community too that helped her to feel included, like going to lunch with some of the women, going to a Valentine's Day event, and just being a part of community with Christians. She started coming to a Bible study that one of our students was leading. This is her with the red hair. And she would engage so intentionally in that small group. She wasn't just kind of there for the free snacks and hanging out with friends. She really dove into Scripture. I took these pictures because I was sitting next to her and I was so intrigued by how she was participating. That's her passage. We print the passage on paper so students can kind of mark it up and look at all the colors and underlines and things she wrote in. At the time, she's not a Christian. This is her first exposure to the Bible, and she was really diving into it. She wanted to come to our missions conference, Urbana, in December, and I was a little nervous about that because it's about, going out into the world and, being a witness for Jesus and stuff like that. So I sat down with her. I'm like, are you sure you want to come to this? This is what it's about. And she was like, yeah, I definitely want to know like what it means to, live your whole life for Jesus. That's something I think I want to learn about. So she came to Urbana. She heard, again, one of my coworkers share the good news clearly and offer an invitation if anyone wanted to commit their lives fully to Jesus. And she didn't stand. And then, how preachers sometimes do, I won't do this today, don't worry, but he kind of circled back and offered again, and she still didn't stand. And then he did it one more time. He's like, this is the last time I'm going to ask, is there anyone else here who wants to follow Jesus? And Charlotte still didn't stand, but Abby, our other student, this is how the story sort of connects, Abby jumped up and ran over there to Charlotte and said, do you want to stand? And she immediately jumped up and committed herself to Jesus and went and prayed with a couple staff and began her journey like with Jesus. Her spiritual journey is longer than that moment. It started months before that, and it's still continuing as she's in community and being discipled and learning how to be a witness in her context. But she learned, and she's still learning, that Jesus is the one worth sticking with. So a lot of times people think of university campuses and think like most students like lose their faith and it's such a dark place. And I'm not going to say that doesn't ever happen, but Charlotte's an example of the opposite of that it can be a really amazing place to share the good news and see people take steps, see students and faculty take steps towards God. Yes, so if you want to hear more stories like that, this is how we do it with students these days, QR codes. If you want to scan that on your smartphone, all you have to do is put in your email address, and then you'll receive my emails with prayer requests and stories such as I've just shared today. But just to wrap up, so we see that Jesus is captivating. He has Peter's attention. Peter is drawn in. He's ready to say yes. Peter realizes he's unworthy. His brokenness and sin becomes clear in the presence of Jesus, and then he realizes Jesus is the one that he wants to stick with. He's been forgiven, beginning to be redeemed, called, and sent, and Peter wants to follow Jesus into that. So I just want to encourage you to think about, where are you at? Are you captivated, drawn in, wanting to know more about Jesus? Are you feeling unworthy and not sure what to do, maybe with your brokenness or with your baggage? Or are you forgiven and sent to fish for people, to be a witness, to take those seeds and spread them to the world? I think that we weren't zapped up into heaven the moment we commit our lives to Jesus, because that's what he wants us to do. He wants us to go and share that good news with those around us. So it's a privilege for me to do that. I love being able to train and equip and organize students into being witnesses in their context as well. And so thanks for letting me share a little bit today about what that looks like. Please keep U of M Flint, Mott Community College, and St. Clair County Community College and Port Huron in your prayers this fall as we work to establish a community made up of all types of students at various stages in their spiritual journey. Please pray that students would be open to a necessary interruption from God. Thanks for letting me join you. And I should just say clearly again, like First Union Church has been supporting me and praying for me since the very moment I came on staff, and honestly in missions things I did before that as well. So thank you for being part of this church. Thanks for caring about students, and thanks for giving and praying so that the gospel could advance on the campuses that I get to participate in. Thanks.
Well, let's stand and let's sing Spirit Song. Seems appropriate title. Number 311 in your hymnals, and then we'll close.
That
And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord keep his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you and give you peace. And as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Just remember, pick up some food from the table